Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the MoneySmart podcast, where we are joined by Peter, aka Conversation of Money. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Peter. I have run a podcast and a YouTube channel called Conversation of Money, and I bring my experience in financial services really to the content sphere, if you will, to try and help people make better financial decisions.
I'd first like to just thank you for actually coming on the podcast, because we reach out to so many people and we really appreciate someone like you of such high coverage, shall I say, being on lots of different shows, actually coming on.
No, I mean, I think I was excited when you messaged me, really, to be honest, mate, once I had a look at what you were doing,
Yeah.
because I think the content space, when it comes to the financial side, to Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, it is populated with older people like myself, and it's nice to have younger people taking the charge and trying to lead with information and lead the conversation. That, I think, is going to be critical moving forward. So I was more than happy to kind of reply immediately and see how I can get involved.
I mean, I was more excited, to be honest, about your book, because you have a book called The Money Basics.
Yeah.
And I've seen that's been a bestseller on Amazon, and you've actually been on different shows speaking about it, and lots of different people have actually promoted it, and it must be an amazing book.
Yeah.
Just, can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so the book, it came about by, I wouldn't say accident, but I wrote the first proposal for the book summer 2021, I believe it was. Winter 2021. But I wanted to create a book that kind of told a little bit about my own personal journey, and also alongside that, shared some of the financial lessons that I had to learn the hard way. And so I called it The Money Basics. And in the book, I created the basic formula. So basics is an acronym. So B stands for budgeting, A stands for avoiding debt, and I cover, the fact that I struggled with debt for 15 years. S is all about saving early. I is investing early, and then C is about credit cards. So credit scores, sorry. So basic formula. It's supposed to be easy, simple to follow. But yeah, I share a lot of my own personal journey and why those principles have helped me create financial security for myself.
So essentially, is it like a biography about yourself and your actual experiences?
Partly so, yeah. I mean, the entire premise of the book is driven by my own experiences and the lessons that I've learned, and how that translates into financial principles, to become your own financial hero, because that's the tagline for the book: how to become your own financial hero. And the idea of becoming your own financial hero isn't about necessarily being a millionaire. It's about being able to make choices out of freedom in opposed to necessity. So a lot of people have to go to work or find themselves in positions where they have to go to a 9 to 5 because they have to pay the bills. Whereas I would like people to be in a position where they don't have to do something if they don't want to, as long as they're smart and they build sound financial foundations.
I think what's particularly amazing about yourself is how you actually talk about your actual personal experience actually struggling with that, and we've actually read up on yourself, and you mentioned you're in retail, corporate banking, and then into doing investing for 15 years before. How did you find that? And like, because you actually experienced a 9 to 5, what was your feeling when you were in them jobs?
Financial services for me was one of those, it was a massive learning curve, and to be honest, it all happened by mistake. I talked about the fact that I struggled with debt for 15 years. I struggled with debt because I was homeless. I was sleeping on the streets, and the only way I could eat was to bounce checks, which spiraled into a massive debt problem. I was on benefits, and then when I was on benefits, you had to go to job interviews, and I was forced to go to a job interview in a building society, and that was my first job. I very reluctantly went to that interview, and luckily got the job. And that kind of saw me start in retail banking first and foremost as a cashier. Then through the years, I progressed into corporate banking, working with businesses, to financing. The biggest thing I financed were a boat and a couple of Bentleys and a Lamborghini. I remember financing a McLaren once, for business owners. And then I transitioned into wealth management, which is where the investment knowledge and all that came in. And I qualified as a financial advisor shortly after that. That period has put me in good stead to do what I do now. So for me, the way I view a 9 to 5 is that it's your training ground, if you will. You can gain experience for free because someone's paying you to be there. And as long as you take it seriously enough, it could spurn into something else, and it has spurned into a full-fledged business for me now, Although when I started in 2020, I didn't think it was going to turn into TV shows, a book, and then a pretty successful podcast and YouTube channel. I did it because I just had this necessity that I wanted to talk about the things that I'd learned.
I feel like when you talk about actually being on the streets and stuff, that has built you as a lot of a better person essentially, because you've experienced all these things, you understand the hardship of it and everything, and you've actually worked up the ranks to actually get to where you are now. And you mentioned like your podcast, being on different shows. How have you actually found that transition from where you were previously and now being where you are now? Do you feel like really proud of that, or do you feel like there's still a lot of work to be done?
It's a combination of both. I mean, I think when I look back over the journey, it's been amazing. It's been great. I mean, it wasn't fun at the time. Sleeping on the street isn't great, but I think I'm a firm believer that you can only connect the dots looking backwards and not forwards. So, in other words, everything that I've been through, everything that's happened has led me here. So that's a blessing in disguise, really, although it doesn't feel like it at the time. But I think from where I am now, a lot of stuff has happened that for me, I thought the book would maybe happen in 2 or 3 years' time. I didn't think the TV was going to happen. When I started in 2020, I was like, oh, if I could do a TV show or be a regular on a TV show, that would be amazing. But I didn't really think it was going to happen within 3 years. And TV only came about because, I would do live Q&As on YouTube and answer people's questions on a Sunday evening between 8 and 10 o'clock. And little did I know, one of the team at the production company for this show on Channel 4 seen me on YouTube and watched regularly, and that kind of then spurred into other things. But there's still a lot more work to do. I think because money is often a taboo subject, and it shouldn't be. I find that it's important for me to be able to say, look, I've struggled. These are the mistakes that I've made. This is how I've managed to be able to transform it, because I think people feel threatened to talk about money, and you have to make it human. So I've messed up my finances so much, but I'm okay now. This is how I did it. And I think that's really important in terms of being able to make it a non-scary subject.
I think that's excellent at the moment in time, because the cost of living, people are like struggling, but people might not be able to be as open as you are.
Yep.
I feel like people like you actually expressing their actual personal experiences, supporting other people to come out, maybe go to charities like Step Change and actually help and look for this support. And then with your book, with like the budgeting, for example, that's quite prominent at the moment. What is your best suggestions of different budgets to use in this current climate?
That's a really good question. So in the book, I try to frame budgeting slightly differently. So there are lots of budgeting methods. You've got the zero-sum budgeting. You have the 50-30-20 method and approach, right? The one that's worked for me, and this is the one that I personally adopt, which I talk about in the book, is think of your budget in 3 separate silos. So very similar to the 50-30-20 rule, or however you want to make it up. But the way I kind of frame it is to say, right, everyone has essential bills. Your rent, your gas, your electric, your council tax, those are the things you absolutely have to pay. That's going to take up a good proportion of your income, really. And for some people, depending on where you live, it will be a greater proportion of your income. Then in that second part, you're going to have your non-essentials, which will be like, maybe your gym memberships and the things that you like to do, right? To keep things interesting, to help you, I guess, feel as though there's a little bit of balance in life. For most people, that's where it stops. So they look at their income and they talk about their essentials, and then they think about, okay, I've got money left over and I'm just going to spend this on my non-essentials. I've worked with a lot of wealthy people during my career as a financial advisor, and what I found is that all of them have a separate pot, and this is what I talk about in the book. So the third pot that I talk about in the book is called the other pot. And the other pot is basically there to facilitate the things that you want to achieve. So, for example, if you want to get on the property ladder, you need to save for a house deposit or anything at all. Like, even if you wanted to go on a holiday, right, a really, really nice holiday, you want to take a gap year, for example, you want £2,000 to save so you can go and, travel around the outback in Australia, you would assign money to that pot. And what it basically does, it allows you to start to think differently. And this is something I learned from the wealthy clients that I worked with. They were all very, very, very intentional with how much money that they earned and how they spent their money, more importantly. They'll pay for all of their expenses that are essential to them. Yes, they have a few things that they do that are non-essentials, gym memberships and things that they enjoy, but they always had something that they put aside for the future, towards a specific goal. And that's what I kind of try and position in the book as a methodology that has worked amazingly for me. And it's been really the foundation to me building a little bit of financial security.
You speak about the actual saving towards your future. Is it always looking towards the future and seeing how you can basically have a safety net for that? So essentially, maybe like a bad time. I mentioned the cost of living crisis, rising food prices and everything. Inflation is currently at 8.7%, if I'm correct.
That's right, yeah.
And just saving towards stuff like that. But particularly, maybe if they're looking about a year or so, you were still doing it then. If they're looking at you then and actually saving, then they'll be more secure now. Is that what you're trying to say?
100%. I mean, I think, look, if for anyone who picks up the book and reads through the book, there are obviously levels to this, right? And I think the most immediate thing that everyone should have is they should have kind of like a rainy day fund. And that's really important, because if you talk about the idea of being able to make choices out of freedom and not necessity, well, a lot of people will be stuck in a 9-to-5 job because I have to go to work. You know, they might be passionate about maybe starting a side hustle or doing something that is more attuned to the way they see the world and the way they see themselves in this world. And money is often a big obstacle there. And being able to have maybe a rainy day fund, and it doesn't matter if it's, 100 quid or 200 quid or 500 quid, the number doesn't matter. Just having it there psychologically, it's quite a powerful trigger in knowing that you've got some financial backing behind you. And more than anything, it's a habit. So one of the things that I wish that someone had told me when I got my first job when I was like 17, 18 was, Pete, that paycheck that you take a percentage. It doesn't matter whether it's 10% or 5%, and just put it aside. You can save it, build yourself an emergency fund, and then once you've got that, you can start investing, because again, there are levels to this. But nobody taught me that. And so my money management was really, really poor. It was the reason why I ended up being homeless, sleeping on the streets in the first place. And it's those little things that, the habits, they can compound. And people will say, 5% of, your first wage may not necessarily be a lot of money. It probably isn't. But as you earn more money, so let's just say your first job pays you £1,000 a month, 10% is £100. But actually, as you get older and you start to earn £3,000, £4,000 a month, all of a sudden that 10% becomes £300, £400. And the fact that you put that money aside, maybe invested it, put it into the market, means that you're going to have a pot of money that gives you the ability to make the choice, because I've got money back in me. I don't need to do something or be stuck in a cycle.
I guess it always builds up essentially, because small amounts are always going to build up. And in terms of in these days now, I know before it might have been less developed, but as technology advances now, is there any budgeting apps you'd suggest to actually help people do this if they're kind of doing it independently and they keep getting in the trap of actually using that money instead? But then there's some apps now you see where it actually forces them already, as soon as the paycheck comes in, they'll take a percentage of it.
Yeah. I mean, apps like MoneyHub are great for that. And with MoneyHub, you can actually set yourself targets, so it reminds you of a target. So, for example, if you wanted to save towards a holiday, it's going to be £500, for example, it will actually send you nudges and remind you and keep you on track to that budget as well. But another thing that is freely and readily available with most people, if you have a bank, is often, and this is a really powerful thing actually, round up. So people go and spend £4.50 on a drink, right? Rounding up that extra 50p, you think you're going to miss it, but you don't. And over a period of time, rounding up those transactions actually leads into quite a bit of cash set aside. And technology is helping us do that quite easily now. And that's the first thing that I would encourage most people to do. If you like the sound of actually having a little bit of cash set aside, a little bit of an extra part, roundups is the best way to start with that, because it automatically happens in the background and you don't miss the money. But seeing it in a pot after about 3 to 6 months and it's a few £100, it's like, wow, it's a really, really big game changer.
There are some downsides to technology as well, because at the moment fraud's quite prominent with banks and stuff, and then you have people selling particular courses where they haven't actually made the money yet. Mm-hmm. What do you think the approach should be to that? Because people are quite pessimistic sometimes because of these potential frauds that they can get into where they can lose a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, you should be pessimistic and you should be skeptical. I mean, that should be your number one position. especially if you're getting, and it's become so much more sophisticated now. And even with AI, it becomes even more sophisticated now. And one thing I would say is, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. But also, if someone's messaging you or pretending to be a bank, for example, ring your bank and confirm that the message is actually from them. And it's sad to see, but this is one of the dangers that you have with social media in general now. I mean, the amount of people that have cloned my account. I'm verified now on Instagram after a long time trying to get verified, but I would have clone accounts pop up every 3 months or so, and they would then message people that follow me, because they think, oh, it's Pete. And I literally had to sit on a phone call with a guy who gave one of these scammers £5,000 because they thought they were giving it to me to invest on their behalf. And it's the wild, wild west out there, unfortunately.
You got to be very, very careful, but you speak very well, and I could tell you've got a lot of knowledge, and I think we should delve more deeply into your actual online presence with different TV shows. Like I think you're a regular on Steph's Packed Lunch.
Yeah, that's
How
right,
do you actually find that, and speaking to different people, for example?
You know what? That's been pretty amazing. It's been really, really cool. And that team is just so awesome. But it's live TV. So one of the things that I recently found out is that I'm mildly dyslexic. And I found this out after writing the book. But I found this out because it's live TV. And you wouldn't think that reading on an auto cue is stressful, but it's so stressful because it's live TV. You can't get it wrong. If you do get it wrong, you've got to be able to recover very quickly. And the way I read, my brain skips ahead. So the auto cue's going, but I'm looking for the word 5 or 6 lines down in the sentence. I then form the sentence. So that was a learning curve. What I've learned to adapt to it now. I do things differently. I memorize it and just be like, what's the gist of it? And then I just go on my own. But it's been a really good experience doing TV more than anything else, just meeting people. I treat it as an opportunity to network more than anything else and to pick up maybe a new skill. I don't know where it's going to take me, but it's been nice to do. It's been really, really nice to do the show.
You find it quite nerve-wracking because, with Young Enterprise now, we're through to the national finals, but we've had to present about 3 stages, and getting up onto that stage, speaking in front of all these people, I just think in my mind, are they judging me? Am I speaking too fast? Am I speaking too slow? Do you find that sometimes, with me, my heart's racing and stuff, and you're just thinking, oh, what if I do wrong? How do you approach it being on live TV? You must have a way of coping, essentially.
I don't get nervous, ever. And that's weird to say because actually I'm an introvert. So in a social setting, I sit back, I watch people. I'm not the life of the party. But I think the reason why I'm able to do what I do and speak on stage and do public speaking and do TV is because it was my job to do that in my 9 to 5 many, many years ago. So I guess we talked about training, the training that you receive in that 9 to 5. That put me in good stead to do this now. And it's very, very weird. I think psychologically, and maybe this is a tip for you, the way I always think of it is, if I'm going to speak in a public forum, first and foremost, the audience don't know if you mess up. That's you knowing that you mess up. And I'm very, very self-critical. So, for example, I have read the auto cue wrong a couple of times, and I'm beating myself up. But the audience at home don't know that I messed it up. And so I think you need to have that in the back of your mind, that it's okay, as long as you can recover and keep going. It's completely fine. The second thing is, if you're the one presenting, then you are the quote-unquote expert for what you're talking about there and then, not the audience. And I think those two things are quite powerful. And I've always used that through my career, presenting, doing talks here and there. People are there to listen to you. And that gives you the authority in that moment to be the expert, to be the person to lead the conversation. They don't know if you mess it up. They don't know if you say something wrong. They're there to pay attention to what your message and what you're saying. And I always view it that way, because mentally that then gives me that space of knowing, okay, I can relax. There is no expectation whatsoever, because there isn't.
I've never actually thought of it that way. I've just always thought, they're looking at me. I don't know if they care or not. Am I going to mess up? But that's just a different way, because if you think about it, you speaking and you thinking yourself as the expert because you're speaking about something that they don't know, that would probably give me a lot more confidence and make me feel a lot more relaxed. And you mentioned when you're on these TV shows about networking, how do you find approaching different people, meeting these different people, and you have social media is like LinkedIn, which is very powerful to meet all these people. How do you value that essentially?
I think whenever you're working in an environment, you've got to think about your brand. Okay, so fundamentally in business and in life, people buy people. That's all it is. And I think when you think about how do you want people to feel when they meet you, how do you want people to feel after you've had an interaction with them, what do you want them to think about you? If you go into it with that thought at the forefront of your mind, you'll always be in a position where you're taking the person as a human being and not as a celebrity, for example, right? And this is weird to say because I did a talk this week. Catherine Ryan was there, and there were a load of other celebrities there. And I'm not a celebrity. I'm just a normal guy. I've done a little bit of TV here and there. I'm still trying to build my profile, as it will. But when you interact with these people, I think sometimes what I've heard is that they feel as though people see them as a celebrity and not a person. And so that saying of people by people is so important. You need to think about the person that you're speaking to. And I always use that when it comes to networking. How do I understand the person? Because the person is really what matters. That person just happens to do something that might be in the public domain or might be interesting in some way, shape, or form. But if you lead with trying to learn and understand the person, I find that is a great ground to start to build relationships with people.
I think you mentioned about the psychological part of it and the person buying a person, but if you to think about it in that way, you can kind of say you're a celebrity anyway. Like if me speaking to you now, I think you're a celebrity. I think it's just a mindset with that, because people can think, even if they're not that big, they can think they're a celebrity. It's just how you perceive that person, I think.
Yeah, 100%. And I think also, I mean, I don't see myself as a celebrity because, like, I'm just not. I'm just an ordinary guy. Like, I get nervous as much as any other person does if I'm doing something completely brand new. I cope with my nervousness by being prepared. That's one of my key things, and it's one of my actual values when it comes to business, being really prepared and poised. I'm just a normal person. I still have insecurities like normal people do, and so do all these big stars. They just get recognized for something that they basically do. I'm still relatively small, and I think to a certain extent, when you're trying to network and build relationships with people, you do kind of have to accept that maybe some people just don't want to, and that's okay, you know? That's completely fine. I mean, some of the nicest people I've met on that show, I mean, Ashley Kane, for example, amazing guy. And if you watched him on Love Island, you would have thought, oh, what an absolute tool. This guy is so brilliant. He's so down to earth, and you just wouldn't expect it. And you might have this preconceived notion of what he's going to be like, but you just don't know until you sit down and have a conversation. And that was really the same with Ashley Kane. It was like, okay, you've seen him on TV, he's a bit of a lad, you know, he's a bit womanizer, but actually you speak to him and he's so down to earth, and he's so willing to have just a normal conversation with normal people. It's incredible. You just don't know what you're going to get when you meet people, and that's why it's important to look at them as a person. Where's the humanity in that person, and trying to connect on that level.
I think that's going back to saying of like, don't judge a person by the front of its cover, like a 100%. Book. And I feel like connecting with these different people and actually networking. You're building your social skills at the same time, but you're actually getting value out of it because you're 100%. Speaking to these people who essentially, I like to think of it, I don't know as much as they do. So I've got to basically talk to them. I've got to find out different things because I'm always going to learn. Yep. There's always someone you can learn from. Yep. I feel like with networking, it's building the social skills, you're learning, and you're meeting these great new individuals that you haven't so-called met at the moment.
Yeah, and also, I think it's really important to acknowledge that you will have a unique perspective that maybe they haven't even thought of before. And I think this is very important for young people as well. There are older people who need to learn from younger people. And so you may be looking for mentors, for example. And yes, you might learn something from this person as a mentor, but there's a lot that this mentor can actually learn from you. It's a two-way exchange of value. And I think as a young person, it's really, really important to think about, you know, what are the things or the perspectives that you have that might be of interest or interesting to the person that you're speaking to as well, because you'll see the world very, very differently to me. And the way the world is currently, I may not necessarily be able to relate to the world or understand the world in its current form better than you do, because you're young, you're in with what's current right now, and that is invaluable. That exchange of knowledge goes both ways.
I feel like with the actual perspectives and stuff, it's quite prominent because from a younger perspective, I'm going to be more focused towards technology because that's basically our generation.
Yep.
And then you're trying to adapt to that, which you have very successfully done.
I don't know about that. It's still about. I'm trying, mate.
I think you have, because you. I've been looking at your YouTube and you've got over 40k plus subscribers and 26 million impressions, which I think is very impressive. I'd dream to have that.
Yeah.
And the actual information that you provide on there is quite invaluable. It's very useful. Can you just expand on how you approach it and the different contents that you actually put out?
Yeah. So, like, I consider my content to be boring, but intentionally so. Especially in the finance space, there's a lot of hyperbole. There's a lot of people who will do videos about Lamborghinis and Rolexes and all this kind of stuff. And I just think it's the wrong place to start. If you think about some of the financial scams, like crypto scams and all this kind of stuff that's happened, predominantly all of those people lead with Lamborghini lifestyle, Rolexes, Bugattis, all this kind of stuff. And that isn't to say that you shouldn't aspire to those things. I just think leading with that in a financial conversation and financial content is quite dangerous. And so for me, I wanted to have conversations with people that I wish someone had with me when I was in my 20s. And that's kind of forming and has formed the way in which I create my content. It's very conversational. So, like, I'm talking to you right now. I try to be as down to earth as possible, as honest as possible. I don't talk about Rolexes or Teslas or Lamborghinis. I don't do any of that. It's about, right, what do you need to know? Why is this information important? Why is it relevant? What are the options that you have? What are the pros and the cons? That's how I like to lead the conversation, because then at least it gives you a jumping off point to do further research and come to your own conclusion. I'm not there to steer you down one route or another. I'm just there as a conduit to help facilitate a conversation that can lead on to something else. And that's been quite intentional on my part. But YouTube has been a massive learning curve. Instagram is still a massive learning. I've been on Instagram since 2000 and I think it's like 19 or so, because I started to test out 60-second videos back then every single day for a year. And even on Instagram, I'm not at 10,000 yet. It's hard. It's really, really hard work.
I guess you're nearly there, but you'll be there soon, because I feel like with your content, it's very relatable. That's what makes it very different to others, because the conversation style, people can actually relate to that.
Yep.
And just think about how this applies to their life when in their 20s.
Yeah.
But now that you're a bit older, I think what would you, looking back now, what would you say to your younger self when you're around 20? What would you say to actually do? What's the best tip you would give?
Man, that's a really good question. There'll probably be a couple of things that I would tell myself. Like, when I was 21, I was in a really, really bad state. I mean, homelessness, benefits. I was in a massive load of debt. I was really, really in a bad place. If I could go back in a time machine, I would have told myself, like, chill. It's gonna be all right. Okay, don't take this too seriously. You're gonna be sweet. Don't worry. But one of the biggest things, I guess, that I would have taught myself is something I alluded to a little bit earlier on: the habit of saving a percentage of your income every single month. I would have definitely drilled that into my head at 21. It doesn't matter whether it's £10 a month, £20 a month, form the habit. Because as I got older and I started to earn really good money, especially when I got into Canary Wharf, if I had formulated that habit, the amount of money that I would have been able to put aside into investments, into other things, would have put me down the path that I'm on a little bit sooner than I am on it currently. And that, for me, is one of the biggest things. We often feel as though we're going to miss, 10 quid, 20 quid there. I mean, I used to go out and spend it on beer money, and most people will do that. You can spend that money on a Nando's now. But setting it aside just gives you that financial security, that foundation, that habit, which has compounding benefits.
I think that ties in quite well to our actual sole purpose of our business, Monito. So our slogan is, we're empowering the next generation for a brighter tomorrow. So with our Saving Koala and our books that we have there, we have the storybook of Kiki the koala, then the activity book. and it's about instilling the behaviors from 4 to 14-year-olds, just instilling the behaviors of doing a good deed, doing something good.
Yep.
You're always going to get a reward for it,
Yep.
but we're trying to eliminate the word of money.
Mm-hmm.
So building the behaviors, and then we have the leaves in there with the saving coin. They do something good. We have clear ones, and we have the green ones. And essentially, if it's two children, you can have a little competition. Essentially, they do a good deed, they do a good chore maybe. You just put a token in.
Yep.
And then once it builds to a level, you can use a whiteboard pen if you want to build a certain level. They get a reward for that.
Yep.
And it's about building specific behaviors. So when they get older, they can, like, for example, with the saving, or can they be more financially aware about what they're spending on.
Yep.
How do you think this? Do you think it's quite relevant at the moment? Do you think it would work effectively? Anything you think we could do better?
100%. Look, one of the things that we know from research is that financial habits are locked in at age 7. So the earlier parents are able to have those kind of conversations, or at least instill the right kind of thinking in their children, the better it's going to be in the long run. Now, I talk a little bit about this from my own personal experience in the book around how at age 5 and age 6, there were certain things that I noticed that came back to haunt me later on in life, especially when I started to make really good money in Canary Wharf. And so I think this kind of stuff, tools are really important, like especially for kids, because kids are a sponge, they take things in. If you can have anything that practically gets them into the habit of, right, you've got one leaf now, pop that in there, it's an exercise that they're going to remember. And that in itself can help with developing the habits that are going to benefit them in the long term. And it can facilitate a really nice conversation around, now you've got this many leaves in, here's a little reward for you. And if you are giving them pocket money as a parent, well, you can then, that leads on to, well, what do you want to buy? And you can have that budgeting conversation very, very early on. So tools like that are amazing.
I feel like also with it, you mentioned about the age of 7. I remember that from our presentation we just recorded for the national finals. They've formed their most lifelong financial habits from then, but then, not habits, skills. But then I feel like with this, you see the leaf now, it can fit coins in. So as they get older, you can switch that into coins so they can build a saving then. Maybe put it in a bank account after that, and then redo it and continuously keep doing like it's a loop.
Yeah.
How would you see that? Because with the podcast as well, that's for the older demographic. So as they build up, we're building to have a long-term interest in the child. What do you think about that? Do you think it's a good idea? Any ways we could improve? Or
100%. I mean, the fact that you've got a physical tool here is great. I would question and maybe encourage you to have a look at how you actually translate that into maybe something on a digital kind of like app, because it is about technology now. And you know, there are probably a number of maybe brands or people that you could partner with that can help you with that. But trying to get something into a digital platform where it's a little bit more interactive and you can feed in content that way, that could be a really good way to develop and add another string to your bow, perhaps.
well, we're looking at actual maybe games, but then we'd have to target more ads on the website. But I feel like with games, that's a long way off. We want to have more established product first, build the base, and then go to games, because on our website at the moment we sell all the products, then we have blogs, particular blog for the older demographic as well. But I feel like we need to become more established as well, and with, as you mentioned about social media, it's really hard to just grow, so it's about having the long game, and as you mentioned, staying consistent. How do you feel like the power of consistency is within like social media and stuff like that to build our brand?
It's all about consistency, mate. It really, really is. I mean, it's hard enough as it is. I think one of the things that consistency will give you is it will give you a consistent presence, because social media is so saturated and so many people are on it trying to do something. It's easy when things get busy just to drop it. I think having that consistency, number one, gives you that track record of, oh, they're actually really serious about what they're talking about. You combine that with quality content as well, and it definitely sets you apart. So consistency is very, very important. Like I said, on Instagram in 2019, because I was testing out the theory of, if I made financial content, would people actually listen? I was doing 60-second videos every single day for 365 days that year. And it kind of gave me the validation of, okay, yeah, actually people were interested and are engaging with the content. And then that facilitated the push to do more long form content on YouTube. And on YouTube, it's posting at least once a week. I used to do live shows once a week at least. That's been disrupted a little bit now because of TV, but the consistency is very, very important.
I feel like with consistency as well, it can tie into many things. Like with children having these financial habits, the parents, as we see on Instagram, can invest into junior ISAs and stuff like that. What is your opinion on them? Because they're essentially tax-free,
Yeah.
that you can put in for your child's future, especially now with university fees, how they're just skyrocketing. What is your opinions on junior ISAs and how parents can approach building investments for their children?
I love junior ISAs. I mean, look, if you're a parent, you should be investing for your kids in a junior ISA. The reality is, because parents can pay into it, uncles, aunts, grandparents can pay into it, anyone can pay into it. It's almost one of those things where you're given the gift of money with the ability to give them a footing, maybe a start in life that you didn't have. And, you know, university fees is a prime example. I'll give you another example where it could be used, you know, a deposit for a house. You know, if you do the calculations, I did do a video on YouTube, probably last year, where I looked at, if you did a stocks and shares junior ISA and assumed a growth rate over a period of time, what that would amount to. It's huge. It is absolutely massive. One of the drawbacks that a lot of parents are fearful of is that the money becomes the child's property at age 18. That scares them. But I say, actually, it shouldn't scare you. If anything, it should encourage you to start having that conversation with the children, with your kids, about the value of money early on. And let them know, by the way, we've been putting this money aside for you for the last, 15 odd years. We want to give you the best start in life possible. It's going to be yours in 18 years time. So, what would you use it for? And start to build and give. That's where money lessons, you can really facilitate effective, meaningful money conversations with a kid, knowing that that's going to be coming their way at age 18. So it's a great tool, and it's a great entrance point, jumping off point into better conversations around financial education at home.
I think that ties in very well to our actual product, because if they're going to have the junior ISA and we're building these financial skills, parents are going to essentially have more security when it's actually released to them. And we did a post on it as well. The power of compound interest is crazy. With like stuff like index funds, for example. There's like a calculator you can do on this website, and that you don't realize it, but the interest just builds and builds and builds in your investment. It's an excellent way of building.
That's the beauty of compound interest. It's the fact that you're getting interest upon your interest, and it's like there is nothing else that ever does that in history. And one of the things that I always say to young people is, like, trust me, that 10, 20 pounds a month that we were talking about earlier, over the course of 20 odd years, is huge. And it's like, you think now, you're 18, 17, 19, you're 20 years old. 20 years is a long way away. Believe me, you're going to be there in a snap. And just imagine having a nice pot of money in an investment that's going to give you the ability to make choices out of freedom and not necessity, which is the whole point in the financial hero concept of the book, right? So doing little things now that have benefit later on, and you're not going to miss 10, 20 quid. You won't. Believe me, you won't. You feel like you will in the moment, but you won't in the long term.
It's just, if you start earlier, the better. That's what I firmly believe in. So just to end on, who do you value as your most influential person, like a role model, for example? Who's your role model through your life, essentially?
Oh man, I've had so many. I think one of recent note, and I actually mentioned this in the book because I was talking about role models. Because back in the day, the rappers of the 1980s and 90s used to be my proper role models, like the Diddy's, Notorious B.I.G., Tupac. Those guys were my role models. Not the best role models when it comes to finances, because if you look at what they portray to be success, it was Louis belts and jewelry and nice cars. That isn't the definition of success in any way, shape, or form. My more recent role model, and this is purely because of his poise and the way he conducted himself in public office, was Barack Obama. Through everything, the political turmoil, the division in the United States, the way he carried himself, for me, is just exemplary.
Is there an inspirational quote that you actually have? I know it's putting you on the spot a bit, but some people actually do. Is there anyone that you particularly have a focus on?
There isn't necessarily an inspirational quote or a person that I have a focus on. but something was said to me a very, very long time ago, and I kind of alluded to this earlier. They said you cannot connect your dots moving forward, you can only connect them moving backwards. And in my case, that quote is so, so true. And it has always been that kind of that comfort that things do happen for a reason, and you go through certain things to arrive at a certain point. And it also kind of gives me that validation not to second guess, not to fight my gut feeling as much as maybe I would have done when I was younger. I mean, if I'm completely honest, the whole YouTube, the whole podcast thing was because in 2019 I had this real gut feeling, you have to do something on social media. It was bugging me all the way through 2019, all the way through. You have to do something. I started in 2020. The first podcast episode went out the first week in January. The first YouTube video went out the first week in January. Little did I know, we were in Thailand at the time for Christmas and New Year's. Little did I know that COVID was going to be this big thing where actually the company that headhunted me let me go. And now I'm sat at home thinking, right, what do you do? So, you know, that saying for me is really important. And I think if I can leave people with anything, trust your gut, follow your gut. If it's telling you to do something, it's probably right that you follow it.
I think that's very powerful, and I think this episode has been a very powerful message, how down to earth you are for the actual size of following and everything that you've actually done. I think it's been a truly amazing episode of the MoneySmart podcast. I'd like to say thank you for you actually coming on and short notice that we gave. I think it's been a brilliant episode, and just say thank you for everything.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.